What's up everybody, Hunter here, and today I wanted to take a look at using the fetch API from a browser and how we can fetch some data and then print it onto the screen using just vanilla JavaScript. And here we go. This is some documentation on the fetch API, the MDN docs. They're pretty helpful. But I wanted to just show you how it works real quick. One quick note is that the fetch API is built into the browser. So let's take a look at the browser compatibilities here. Note that it will not work with Internet Explorer, but you know, Internet Explorer is on its way out. But on all the other modern browsers, you can use the fetch API. So if you don't need to use Internet Explorer, you can use the fetch API. Alrighty. What I have here is just a very basic index.html, and I have this examples or example.js file, which is here, and all I have loading is a function that says fetch data, and I'm calling that function below, and we'll do all our stuff in this function. And I have that open here. And if we go to the console, you can see we have the start fetch. If I do a reload, that console log is here. So everything is working. And the API we're going to use is this request response.in site right here. So it gives you some fake API endpoints to hit. So you can get like a list of users. You can like post to create a user. We can look at post as well, because you can do that with the fetch API. But first, let's get some users and let's display it onto the screen. Alright, whoopsies, here we go. So to start, we can just do fetch. And then in fetch, you want to give it the URL that you're fetching. So if we go to here, and we're doing the users, I think if we click on this in the new tab, okay, so this is the data we're gonna get, and let's just do this one right here. Alright, if we paste that into the fetch, let's take a save, and let's go back here and do a reload. So as you can see, nothing happened in the console. If we take our look at the network tab, we can see that it's working. So let's do that again with the reload. Okay, so this is the fetch. This is the URL we pasted in, right? And it's doing a get by default. And then if we go to preview, we can see that data is coming in. Cool, so it's working. Before I go any further, I wanted to just do a console.log of this. Let's just see what's going on here. So what is this actually returning to us, right? What happens when this runs? So if we go back to the console, okay, so we can see that it's a promise that is returned, and there's like an initial pending status. So I'm not gonna go into too much how promises work. I assume that you have some promise experience. If not, let me know down below and I'll make a video on promises. But knowing that this returns a promise, we can now do something like this, right? You can chain a dot then to the promise, and what this gives back is response. Okay, and now I'm going to use the arrow function here, and we can do a console.log a response, and we can see what it looks like. So we know that's a promise. We chained the then. Okay, so now this is what it actually looks like. This is the first thing that it gives us back. So this is known as a response body. So let me go back a little bit. And then yeah, this is a response object, right? And it has like a status right here, and there's like it is okay here. I'll go into this in a little bit. But what you want to note is that this isn't very helpful to us in its current state. So we need to do another step to this to make it a little more useful. What we actually need to do is run this. If we go back to here, we need to run this JSON. I guess they call it a body mixin. So you can run this on the response to transform it into JSON. And that is what we're going to do. So with promises, we could do another then. And now, actually, let's do that in here. Let's do that in here real quick and see what happens. So response.json, right? So we can do a const data equals response.json. And let's do a console.log of data. Let's see what happens if we just try to do that all in here. Okay, we get another promise, right? So that means we need to wait a little bit for this response.json promise to resolve before we can just use it immediately, right? So that means we need to do another then. And in order to kind of wait for it, you can run the response.json and then you can just return that. So if you return it, it's going to come into this second then once it's done, and now we can have data in here. Add another arrow function, console.log data now. Let's take a look at what data looks like. And now if we do a refresh, okay, cool. We see that it actually looks like something we can work with. So this is the object it gives back. If we take a look at the network tab, it basically looks more like this. And so now there's another data property on it with the actual array of data that we want. Alright, so what we have to do is now do data.data. I mean, you can kind of call this whatever you want. Like I think the docs just use this data example, so you sometimes end up with data.data. It all depends on the API and the structure it gives back. This just happens to be data.data. If you find that confusing, you can change this to anything you want. So now if we do console.log of data.data, give it a little save, we're going to ignore all this stuff for now, the pagination stuff. And now we just have our array. Cool. So the other thing we want to do is check for errors, right? So what you do how to do that is at the very end you add a .catch, and then any errors will pop up in here. And you can do a console.log of the error. Alright, cool. So I want to show you a quick thing about this real quick about the fetch, because if you see we try to type in a bunch of gibberish and try to throw this error, right? What happens here? Well, we get a 404, but then we also get an undefined here, right? So as you can see, it didn't go into this catch error. It didn't actually throw any errors. And that is kind of I guess how fetch works. It's not going to throw an error on certain things. One of those things being a 404. So what you need to do is you need to check for it yourself, basically. You need to come in here. Let's do another console.log of the response and see what that looks like. Do a little refresh. Okay, so here's the response, and then basically the status is 404, and you could do a check on all these statuses. Like if it's a 200, that means it's good, but anything other than that means it's bad. Or you could use this OK, which is a false. So basically, if there's anything wrong, the OK is going to be a false, and you have to manually kind of catch that yourself. So you can do right here is you do a little if response.OK. Actually, if it's not OK, you want to throw an error. And you can make this the actual status or whatever. I'm going to do error right here. And let's take a look. Alright, and I'm going to leave this console.log of the response up so we can see what's happening. Okay, so here's that console.log, and now we actually get an error here. If we go to the example, see how it's in the catch now? Like this code isn't running, it's not trying to do this .json. That's what we want. We don't want to do that when there is an error. Cool. I just want to show you that because this is kind of an extra step some people kind of miss, and then they're confused on when they get an error why their code still runs and then breaks the rest of everything. So let's put this guy back and leave this here, and then we'll take a look at the response.ok again. And so response.ok equals true. That means we continue with our code, and then here's our data again. Right? Everything looks good. I'm going to get rid of this console.log. I'm going to leave this little checker here. And now let's print this to the screen. So how do we do that? Well, in the body, let's add some HTML, maybe like a div or something. And then we can give it a ID. I don't know, we'll just call it like app or something, right? So we want to basically inject HTML into this div using JavaScript. Well, how do we do that? We're going to do it in this step after we have our data. So after everything's done, we'll inject it. And then what you can do is do a document.querySelector. Right, and then you do app, and then there are kind of many ways to insert HTML into HTML with JavaScript. One of the ways is just do innerHTML, right? And you can do equals, I don't know, if you just want to add a paragraph. Actually, let's do an H1. We can just do hello. So, as you can see, it works. innerHTML works. And you can just do, maybe search JavaScript, insert HTML. I think there's a better way to do it. Okay. There's another way called insertAdjacentHTML, which does pretty much the same thing, but you can choose, like, do you want to do it before the element, after the element? It gives you a little more flexibility. See how there's the example of you can insert it here, or then insert it here, or right before the tag ends, or right after the tag ends. So this gives you a little more flexibility. And so you specify which position you want, and then you give it the HTML that you want to insert. Alright, so I think I'm going to use this because it looks a little cooler. And now we're going to do, I think we can do after begin. I'm going to do it after that begins, and then we'll just put the tag here. See if that still works. Do a little refresher here. Cool, the hello is still there. Alright, so we don't want just hello, we want our data, right? So, knowing that we have our data, how can we kind of insert it? So what we need to do is loop over the data, because it's an array. You can see here it's an array of objects. So we want to loop over every object in the array and kind of construct a HTML string from it. Alright, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to make a const of HTML, and that's going to equal data.data. And we're going to do a map over the array of data. Right? And what are these users? So basically you can do user, and you want to return, and let's just return like a string here. So maybe like the name, right? And you can do name. So you could do like name plus like user dot. Let's take a look at what it says here. So user dot first name, right? That's one of the things on the object. You could do name plus user dot first name, right? And we actually need a paragraph tag. So you could use this plus, the old school way of doing the plus, but we can also use the new school way, which is template literals. And what those are is if you do little backticks here, you can just start typing into here as if it were a string, right? Makes it a lot easier. So you do name, and now if we want the first name, you want to do $ and a couple curlies, and you can just insert variables into here. You can just insert JavaScript variables into here. So you would do user dot first name, right? So let's take a look at what that looks like real quick. I'm going to leave this hello here for now. I just want to see where we're at. So let's do a reload. Okay, cool. So as you can see, now we have an array, because map gives you back an array. So now we have an array of name, George, so name. Alright, this is starting to look similar. First name, Janet, Emma, right? Everything looks like that, but it's still in an array format, which is not what we want. We want it to give it to us in kind of a single string. So to do that, at the end of the map, you can just chain on a join. If you just join on the nothing, like a blank, then it'll give you what we want. Okay, cool. So now this is what our HTML looks like. We click on this. Click on this example. See how the HTML is here. This is what we want. Cool. Now we can just put our HTML, instead of this hello, we can put it here. When we do a save, let's just delete this real quick. Actually, I want to leave it. And now we see the data printing to the screen, right? And if we inspector it under the elements, you can see that our paragraphs are working. Cool. Let's add some more stuff to it now, right? Because you can basically do whatever you want in here. I mean, it's a little weird writing the HTML like this, but this is kind of how you need to do it when you map over the data. So if you do like a div, right, and like a class maybe of user, and you have first name, I think email is another thing you can have. Email, right? Let's save that and see what it looks like. Okay, cool. Inspector here, and we get the user div with the class of user, right? And then we have the name, first name and last name. So let's style this up a little bit. How do we style it? Well, if you go in here, you can just add in a style tag. And we can just target that user the user class on this div that we did, right? So maybe we do something like user, and we'll give it a background color of, I don't know, a light gray, and then some padding, and then maybe some margin at the bottom. Okay, so now, okay, cool. We can see that things are happening. So we're now getting the data using the fetch API, and then we're just putting on the screen. It's something I like to do because when you're just in here looking at the data, sometimes it doesn't mean anything. It's a little more exciting when you can get it onto the screen and then you can actually style it and stuff like that. So I find that to be a lot more interesting in the examples. So let's add one more thing, which is the profile image. Right? I'm gonna close it, give it an alt tag. Alright, so if we go back to our data, there was a profile image on here. Okay, an avatar, right? So we want this avatar, which looks like some S3 link, so it should just work. And what we want to do in here is the same template literal squiggle things. So we'll do user.avatar, right? And then for the alt tag, let's just do user.firstname for accessibility reasons. You always want to put alt tag on your images. So now when we reload, cool, we get images here, we get the name, and we get an email. Alright, so that is how you use fetch. Kind of went a little off tangent with this mapping and the HTML stuff, but you don't have to do this, right? You can totally skip this step if you want to. If this is weird to you and you don't need to use your data like this, you can totally skip that part. But I just thought it was a little cool thing to add. So the other way you can use fetch is if you do a post request. So say you want to create a user, right? You can do something called a post request instead of a get request. And that is based on this. So if you want to create a user, you want to do a post request. And what you can do, I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to do post data. And I'm just going to leave this part. Maybe I'll delete all this stuff in here. Right, so now we're posting data. Everything looks the same. So how do you post data? Well, in fetch, you can give it a second argument, which are like options to fetch. And if you go back to this, I'll close some of these. If you go back to this, I think there's a options thing here under the fetch API. Where is it? Concepts and usage, maybe? I don't know. It's somewhere in these docs. But one of the things you can do is you can specify the method. And now we want post, right? And then another thing you want when you do this, when you post, is you want to add in some headers. You want the content type to be application/JSON. So this is like telling the API you're posting to some additional information. So you're saying, all right, I'm going to post to you some application.json, and then the actual thing you're going to post is going to be in the body. Okay, and if you just try to do it like just an object, it's not going to work. So let's take a look at this example, right? So they have name and leader. as the post. And then when you create it, the response should give you back name, leader, and an ID, right? So if you just give it this, it's actually not going to work. Let's take a look at what happens. So we get some errors here. Let's take a look at the network tab. And this is our post. And what does it say? Okay, the request, the payload you're sending to it looks like this object thing. So what we need to do is we can't just send a straight object. We need to wrap this in a JSON.stringify. And then, so it's going to turn this into a JSON object, which we're telling the API like we're about to send the JSON object. So we need to make it into a JSON object or JSON string. And now it's going to work. So when you do the post, the payload you can see looks like the one we gave it. The post is here. So if you're curious where those headers are, the request headers is what you're sending. So now you can see application JSON here. There's some other ones here too. And then on the response, preview and response are basically the same thing. Preview is just like a prettier version. You can see that we get the Morpheus leader back, or the Morpheus name back, leader, job. So that is working as well. And one more quick thing I want to show you is you can actually do something like this. If you're on some like random website or you need to troubleshoot why your fetch isn't working, you can kind of click on anything that is a in the network tab, anything that is a request. You can kind of right click on it and do copy as fetch. Okay, if you do copy as fetch, come in here. Let me open a new file. You paste. So this is actually going to copy for you the same exact request you're making, right? So you can kind of see what headers you're sending. If you have to send along like credential tokens and stuff like that, you can see what those look like, and you can kind of use something like Postman, and you can put it in there to troubleshoot it, or you can copy it and like take it into a brand new HTML file and poke around at it. So that is a nifty trick. If you wanted to bring it into Postman, you would probably do something like a copy as curl, and in Postman you can import that and it'll give you the request if you ever use Postman. If not, you can copy as fetch and tinker around with it. So that is the Fetch API, kind of a general basic overview on how to use it. Hope you enjoyed this video. It's more of a vanilla JavaScript video. If you like this video, give me a like, subscribe to my channel. The other way to do the promises is to use async await. If you're into that, I can, I guess, do a little gist of that. If you want to see an async await version, let me know and I'll do that, and I'll put it in the comments as well. Anyways, have a great day.